Hey, in this video, you'll learn how to model this in Fusion 360, including these ribbed out features, these holes, fillets. We'll even start with the simpler phase 1 and get to the more complicated phase 2, making design edits and reusing the features we did in the design history. Here we go. All right, getting started. First few things, just like to hit save, give it a name, put it in the right folder. Make sure my dock units are good, millimeter. Turn on the origin. I'm saved. And start a new component. Rule number 1 in Fusion 360. Not a requirement for this one. We'll start by selecting the front plane and hitting the sketch icon. We'll begin with a line starting at the origin, going up. And if you want to make this construction, right-click on it, choose for construction, normal construction, or you notice X is the shortcut for that. Dimension it, make it 40. And then we want to do a few circles. A right-click brings up some shortcuts down here if you'd like to go to circle. I'm a big fan of the S key. S is in Sketch, and I have some of the defaults ready to go. You can add shortcuts here, but you can see that circle's there. I'm going to leave it there, not drag it off, but keep it there. Click on it, and that starts my circle. I'm still in the circle command. I'll draw another one. D for Smart Dimension, and drop in some diameters. 48 and 22. Now for creating the fingers that come off of this circle, I'm going to go to line command, click going down, go over, just kind of short, and then I'm going to snap to, and it'll have some tangency there. Let's add a smart dimension between these two lines that's doing an angle of 7 degrees. Make sure that there's tangency, so select the line and the arc, right click, choose tangent. Great. Now what's missing on this vertical line here? It can go anywhere in space, it looks like. So if I want to actually snap to a quadrant or snap aligned with the origin, let's do that. So I'll select maybe the origin and right click and say that that's horizontal. These 2 points line up horizontally. Now it's mostly defined except for the length of that line or just how low this sits. Same kind of thing. I can align it with the origin. Right click, choose the points, make them horizontal, and those line up. That's a great way to do it. And what I'd like to do is have the same thing on the other side and have some symmetry. So I'll do S for search and find mirror, type in mirror. And there's 2 mirrors, the feature mirror and the sketch mirror. I wish it was a little more clear, the difference, but the sketch has kind of more of an outline shape than a solid shape. The objects I'm going to mirror, I'll select those, and then the mirror line right here in the middle. Next, let's do an extrude, and the cool thing about Fusion is we can select contours or areas of the sketch. We don't have to extrude the entire sketch if we don't want to. I select everything, and then we're doing a symmetric extrude so that keeps the planes in the middle and the origin centered, which makes it easier with our reference planes in a good location. The total distance that I want to extrude everything end to end, I actually don't know. So I'm just going to do something large like 55. And because we're going to be, I guess, cutting this and trimming this here in just a little bit. When you want to select something that's hidden away from you, click and hold with your left click. Notice all the cool options you've got. I can find that YZ plane, select it, and now hit sketch, or it's selected for me, right click and do create sketch. Same thing. It orients our view so we're looking straight at it. And what I'm going to do is sketch starting a kind of a line to arc technique. Now, when Fusion doesn't wake up a reference edge or line, that's kind of normal for it not to. So what you have to use is project, P for project, and some different ways to get what you want. So you can try first the selection filter and the geometry, the edges. Like this edge will wake up. That's fine. But when this rounded edge doesn't, you need to choose the body and then select it. And look, now there's a line up there that's created, this kind of purple line, which is now usable for sketch connections and constraints. I sketch a line. I'm just kind of making it up as I go where it's going to, be. And then I click and drag with my left click, and that creates a tangent arc. It's a nice little shortcut. And if it's driving you crazy, just delete it and go up to arc and sketch that arc. Finish the line, and I'm going to actually sketch the final line here and then start adding some relationships. First thing, I want this to be tangent at the bottom. Great. I want the two lines to be symmetric or the same, right? So I can make them equal and drag this out. It looks like I've got some, excess there in the arc. It's kind of strange. So we'll just undo. When stuff gets tricky, I'm glad that happened while everybody's watching. So before I maybe even make these equal, I can make these 2 points horizontal. That might be smarter to do that first. And then as I drag this over, that's looking pretty good. There should be tangency coming into these two. Now it kind of looks like there's an extra arc there, which is really strange. So I'm going to connect the endpoint to endpoint. Coincident. That's better. Not sure how I even did that, but it looked like I had an extra entity there. Selecting the line and arc, tangent, it's failing to solve that. Okay, so let's try again. I've got my lines and an arc. I'll grab an arc, just a 3-point arc. It's fine, or I could do tangent arc. I do tangency down to the bottom. Great. How about tangency here and here? Great. So now it's finally solving. Sometimes I've just sketched something extra. That probably happens to you too. Delete it if it's bugging you, and then sketch it again and reassign. Next, we can add a construction line, but I want it to be right in the midpoint. Here's a nice little trick. When you're hovering near it, if the triangle wakes up in the middle of it, that is the midpoint. And I can click on that midpoint and then bring it down. I'm going to connect it here. This needs to run up and down or vertical. And I want it to be construction. And then I also want to start adding some dimensions. First, got a radius down here of 10, and then I've got an angle between this line and this line at 2 degrees. Looks like it's fully defined. Great. So let's drag in a circle and add a dimension there, D for smart dimension, and we'll put this at 10 for the diameter. We're now going to use this as a cutter. We'll hit extrude. We're using this new sketch or profile to do our extruding. Click and hold, and that lets us pick our profile and extrude. Dragging it out, it's wanting to cut by default. So a couple things, we want it to be symmetric, going both directions, but we're not chopping that out. Instead, we want to flip it around. A couple ways to do it. We can choose to cut the exterior portions or contours, or we can use the intersect command, which is effectively achieving the same thing. Now looking back at this, it looks like I made a mistake. I shouldn't have this lower portion. So great thing with Fusion and CAD modeling is you can edit the feature at any time or edit sketch. Right click on the feature, and that has to do with the depth. If you remember, we were selecting areas of this that we extruded. So I come back in and pick the profiles, and I'm just going to leave out this lower one. Next, let's start a sketch on the top plane down here on the bottom. Even though we want to do a boss that's sitting up higher in space, we can still start a sketch here. So if I hit create sketch and sketch 2 circles, add 2 smart dimensions, 18, 26 in diameter. And now we want to begin the extrude, but we don't want it to start from down here. So we hit extrude, and right now it's doing a cut. And what I'd like for it to do is to start at a specific point. Now let's do an extrude with this sketch from down below. The cool thing with sketching and extruding is you don't have to extrude from the start location. If you come over to start, you can actually offset this or start from a specific object. So if I do an offset and do 67, this is going to start it up high. And we're going to flip the direction so that it's coming down, but we don't want it to come down a certain distance, but instead join in, create geometry, and come to an object. So which object am I coming down to? Let's try this point, and extruding, starting up high, coming down to a point. Pretty cool. Now, could you have just put a plane up in space? Absolutely, that'd work great, but just a good thing to be aware of that you can change where things start and where they end in the Extrude tool. Next, let's reuse a sketch. I'm going to reuse this sketch and cut that out, drag it through, make sure that it's all the way through with a through all. That cuts that out, reusing that sketch. And then what about reusing geometry? We want to kind of slice this out of the model. So what I'll do is use the project again. So select this sketch plane and start a sketch. And what I want to do is reuse this entity. That'll be fine. But I want to be able to extend this arc here. All right, so we want to reuse this geometry. Looks like it'll be very easy to do, but I don't know an easy way to extend or manipulate a projection. So maybe you guys in the community know how to do that. I can align a 3-point arc. So if I click the point and then just match it, that looks great. That's what I want to achieve. And then I also want to reuse this line or arc. So if we hit extrude, it doesn't know what to do. So instead of redrawing the line, I'll use project again, and I'll select this line, and it's projected on. It's now part of the geometry I can use. You can see that it's now extruding a cut. We'll do both directions all the way through. Now for adding fillets. So if I select faces, it's going to grab, these edges affected in the faces. But what I want is kind of all around this thing. And this is where Solidworks has a great advantage. They have a terrific tool for selecting lots of different fillets and edges. So we sort of have to manually do this. Okay, so just starting to select the edges. It's 2 millimeters. That looks good. I'll hold Command or Control. Start selecting the interior. Make sure it's got all the edges. Now we could mirror this over, this feature, because it's symmetric. But I'll come in and select the edges. This is one thing I love about Fusion. It does really well is the solving of fillets. SolidWorks can be rather kind of order dependent when it comes to fillets, and because of the direct modeling and capabilities of Fusion, it does a nice job managing fillet solutions. Hit OK. Okay, so what I'm missing, it looks like I might be missing an under fillet here, so right click and do another fillet or repeat. Bring it back up, or we could edit what was already there, or we can drag in a just new feature fillet of 2. Now for phase 2. So let's make a few edits to this model. Different strategies here, but what if we roll back to kind of this more base feature, and then we can try to drag or do a direct edit to this face. Now, how do we move or offset a face without having to go back and manipulate the sketch? Well, you can do that with direct edit with Q, and we want to do a new offset, and we're going to bring that down, and it's offsetting all of it. Direct offset's not working great, so let's try the move command. And you actually can move faces in Fusion 360. We want to move it down 8 millimeters. Let's see if it solves, and it solves great, terrific. And next, can we introduce a shell to hollow this out? S for search, look for shell, shelling this feature, and you want to select the faces you're getting rid of. Select this upper face and these sides, looks good, 5 millimeters. Now if you didn't want all of it select at once, turn off that chain, and then you select each face one at a time, and we're doing, I think, 5 millimeters. Okay, next, let's roll back the tree, or roll back the design history and have everything solve and see how it did. So it looks like we've got some things to fix and some fillets to catch up. Actually, let's correct the sketch. Come back in. So the sketch is just no longer valid, right? So what we want to do is we'll just delete that sketch and try again. So instead, we'll just do a new arc, point to point, and connected there. That looks great. A line going across. Going to cut this out. We could reuse that extrude that was there. 2 sides, symmetric, all the way through. Much better. And then let's delete this second feature that was there. That looks good. Now, what about the fillets? Still solving for the most part, but some are missing and some of these interiors are missing. Next, let's edit the fillet that's missing some edges, these new edges. And in SolidWorks, there's a cool way of just selecting a feature, like selecting the shell. So if you select it and then add, let's do a new fillet, select the shell, add, a fillet of 2 millimeters, is it going to let us fillet that new shell feature? It does. It's pretty exciting. You can just select a feature, and then we can also hold Command Control, come in and select these missing edges down at the bottom that got resolved and redone. Be sure to check out the rest of the series of all these different model manias done from SOLIDWORks in Fusion 360. It's a great thing for you to go through and practice, improve your overall modeling and capabilities with CAD. See you guys in the next video.